I must mention here that the last biography of Savarkar was written in the 1960s when he was still alive by this amazing gentleman called Dhananjay Keer. Till then and after that too, there have been lots of biographies, lots of books on Savarkar and his life. But on a national level, to cover a pan-Indian audience, from 1960 till the time my book came out in 2019, it was truly amazing that nobody thought it pertinent to evaluate in a scholarly and academic manner a person who, as Chakravarti ji so rightly and beautifully espoused, contributed so much to this country. He intrudes today's contemporary politics in a manner that few personages of the past do. He is a part of election rallies. He is a part of election manifestos. His ideology of Hindutva is in ascent today, politically in India. So a very scholarly and an objective assessment of the man. What were his contributions? What were his failings? What were his, the innumerable, services to the motherland that he did in his 80 long years that he lived, 1883 to 1960. I think there was a dire need for somebody to do this work. But why was this not done? In the course of my research, I came to know the reason for that as well. Ever since post-independence, Savarkar became for India what one calls the term in English, persona non grata. As Chakravarti ji mentioned, anybody associated with Savarkar, even by a far distance, had to pay a very heavy price for this association. Forget political association, forget ideological association. One example that I quote numerous times is that of Pandit Hridaynath Mangeshkar, the illustrious brother of Bharat Ratna, Lata Mangeshkar ji, Asha Bhosle and others. Savarkar was a great poet. We heard right at the beginning Jayostute, his iconic poem. Similarly, there was this very, very beautiful Marathi poem, Ne Majasi ne Parat Matra Bhumila Sagara Pran Tadamalala. In front of the ocean in Brighton, in England, he looks at the ocean and spontaneously bursts into poem, saying, you have brought me to this land, cheated me literally by bringing me here, saying, I will give you education. But of what use is this education if it is not of help to my motherland? So this poem was actually tuned by Hridaynath Mangeshkar in All India Radio. And guess what happened? Something very similar to what was going to happen here this evening of a cancel culture. He got a show cause notice from All India Radio saying, can you explain why you chose this poem? And Hridaynath Mangeshkar ji gave a two-line reply saying, great poem and a wonderful poet. Good enough reason to tune the poem and have it sung. And for that crime that he committed, he got sacked from All India Radio. He lost his job from All India Radio. This in those glorious days of Abhivyaktiya Swatantrya and, freedom of speech and Sahishnute, Nehruvian India of tolerance that we all talk about. So obviously after an incident like that, when someone of his stature also faced this cancel culture, obviously people became extremely nervous that if you be associated with him, you will have to pay a heavy price. And so that is why there was no kind of evaluation that was done of him or his life, his biography, and so on. And in those 60 years, there have been so many biographies written of so many great heroes of our country, whether it is Gandhiji and Nehru, Subhash Bose, Bhagat Singh. History is a discipline, and as a historian, I would like to emphasize that history is a discipline which constantly works on a process of re-evaluation. Every generation looks back and tries to evaluate what people of the past have done. There is nothing that is cast in stone. So in such a scenario, the fact that Savarkar did not receive his due, that was what really made me upset. And there is this very famous quote of American novelist Toni Morrison, who says, if there is a book that you want to read and it has not been written yet, you must be the first one to write it. So with that, thought in mind, I thought that there is no book on him in recent times, particularly in English. And that is why I took on this task of writing these 2-volume biography. I was extremely scared and nervous whether I am competent enough to actually write about a character as expansive as Veer Savarkar, the multiple dimensions that he brought out so beautifully, a fiery revolutionary in his time, someone who started India's first ever organized secret society, Gupta Samsthay, for Sashastra Kranti, which was initially called Rashtra Bhakta Samuha, which later became Mitra Mela and later Abhinav Bharat. Now, even in our school textbooks, in our growing up years in history, the revolutionary movement, the Sashastra Kranti movement is always shown as something that is a fringe movement. It is not a mainstream. Mainstream was only the non-violent struggle. And Bollywood films, De Di Hame Azadi, Bina Khadg Bina Bhal, Sabarmati ke Sant Tune Kar Diya Kamal. No insult to anybody. Every movement was important. But was it only non-violent struggle which got us freedom? Or all through from 1857 to 1946, 1857, Savarkar saved the revolution by calling it the first war of independence. 1946 is unfortunately to this day called as the naval mutiny. It should be called the last war of Indian independence because that was the last nail in the coffin of British colonialism. Because after the naval mutiny happened, inspired by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and the Indian National Army, we finally got freedom. Within a few weeks, the cabinet mission plan was sent from England to negotiate transfer of power. In Hindi, there is a proverb which says, "Laton ke bhoot baaton se nahi mante." Those who need a danda. So the British Raj was not going to give concessions through all these peaceful negotiations. Only when there was Sashastra Kranti, when there were violent upsurges in different parts of the country, that was when they would actually yield to some extent. And in that particular process, Savarkar played such an important role. As he mentioned, in India House, how many of these names also cause any kind of recollection in our minds today? Shyamji Krishna Varma. Till the time, I think our Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi, brought back his ashes from London to India, nobody even knew who this gentleman was. He was the one who organized the revolutionary movement in London. And his only dream was, once India becomes free, my ashes should be immersed in the oceans and rivers of free India. India became free, but everybody forgot who Shyamji Krishna Varma was, who was the man who actually organized this movement in such a widespread manner all across Europe. And of course, thankfully now we had this honor. So along with Shyamji Krishna Varma, Madam Bhikaji Kama. In New Delhi, if you go, there is a Bhikaji Kama place. You ask Delhiites, do you know who Bhikaji Kama was? Was it a man, woman? Very few people would even know who that is. Madan Lal Dhingra, as he mentioned, Lala Hardayal, who formed the Gadar party, which created a revolution across continents, not only India, but also Canada, San Francisco. All this at a time when there were no modern means of communication, no WhatsApp groups through which you can communicate with each other. At such a time, across continents, people were actually planning not for concessions as the Congress was trying at that time, but for complete liberation of freedom. And the first flag of independent India, designed by Savarkar, along with Hemchandra Das Kanungo of the Anushilan Samiti in Bengal, was taken to the International Socialist Conference in Stuttgart in London, in Germany. Madam Bhikaji Kama jumps on to the dais and the British try to stop her from unfurling that flag. She says, "I don't care what you're going to do. From this moment, India is free." And a woman actually unfurled the first flag of Indian independence right in the heart of European imperialism, the flag designed by this very man, whom we call all kinds of names. So many of these other people from our very Mysore, MPT Acharya, a very close associate, a Mandya Mayengar from this very part of the country. He was a close associate of Savarkar. He has his entire memoirs written I don't know how many people of us in Mysore also know that there was an MPT Acharya who contributed so much to the revolutionary struggle. So very, very willfully, a lot of these names, a lot of these narratives have been pushed away from the mainstream of history. And that simple, linear, monochromatic narrative of what the freedom struggle was has been pushed down our throats. So these different aspects of his life, a firebrand revolutionary, a very, very sensitive poet. Look at the contradiction. Somebody who is actually a revolutionary is also so sensitive that when he actually sees the ocean, he bursts into emotion. The contradiction, the virodhabhas in the character itself was something that was very, very unique. A very prolific writer, a journalist, a playwright, an amateur historian of sorts, and a social reformer, as he mentioned, and a political ideologue who gave a very, very cogent definition of what Hindutva is. And as the president of the Hindu Mahasabha, those 6 years that he was the president, he made it a fighting fit party, so that it could oppose the Muslim League and the Congress in those very, very difficult years leading up to freedom. But today, after so many years, 75 years of freedom, our only, gratitude to such a person is, as he mentioned, all these insults that we do to him without understanding his life. So that was the reason that really propelled me to write extensively on his life. And I knew that, the backlash will be there. Chakravarti ji mentioned dismantling Global Hindutva Conference. I am very proud to inform you that all the organizers of those conferences, including that infamous historian who wrote about Aurangzeb and tried to cover up his sins, they have all been behind me, hounding me literally for the last 2 years, making all kinds of personal allegations, trying to discredit my work and so on. And in a true Savarkarite spirit, I decided not to take it lying down and have dragged all of them to court for a defamation case so that you can dismantle what you want, but whom are you going to dismantle? We have been around for centuries. We have tolerated the repeated invasions, incursions of so many, forces that have come from outside. A set of people sitting in some university, you are not going to dismantle us. So I think if there are in the audience youngsters who are inspired enough to write history, and there is a dire need, I tell you, for modern nationalistic version of Indian history to come out. If there are young people who are inspired enough to write about history, I must tell you, please brace yourself for every kind of attack. Because as he rightly mentioned, the battle is between the pro-India and the anti-India forces. And history in that is a very, very important discipline. In our growing up years, we thought it is just a subject which we learn by rote, who succeeded whom, which year, what war, and then memorize everything. I'm sure all the children hate history in school. The history teacher is the most hated person because the most boring manner it is taught to you. But as you grow up, you realize that history is that mirror in which you can identify yourself as a nation. It gives you a sense of identity, who you are, what are your roots, where have you come from. What is your identity as a nation, as a civilization, and as a people? So if true history of India, undistorted history of India is actually written today, obviously all these anti-India forces, they will have no legs to stand upon. So there will be numerous attacks on those who try to propound the correct history of India based on facts and documentation. So grow a thick skin. It is a dharma yuddha. It is nothing less of a dharma yuddha. All kinds of tactics will be used against you, but the only inspiration in such cases is perhaps Savarkar himself. And I conclude with those lines where when he's caught, when the ship actually in which he's being brought from London to India, for some time it docks at Marseille in France. And Savarkar opens the porthole of the toilet of the ship and jumps into the ocean, swims a little bit, goes to France, but he's caught back and brought by the British soldiers. And that entire episode becomes an important case of arbitration between Britain and France in the International Court of Justice in Hague, where at any cost the British wanted him back to India and tried because they thought of him as a D category or a dangerous category criminal. When they bring him back to his cell in the ship, he bursts into another poem. He says, Anadimi Anantami. You know, the old Hindu tradition of the soul being indestructible. He mocks the British soldier sitting there saying, you're going to catch me and put me in jail. My soul is something that is without a beginning, without an end. So whom are you going to capture? So I think these guiding lines of Savarkar himself should be our inspiration. And with those, thoughts, one must proceed with this work. And in this work, where there are so many people who are against you, people literally hate you, in such occasions, to actually be honored, to be recognized, to be felicitated and feted, and that too, at the hands of someone you so admire and respect, in a city which is so close to your heart, I think it is such a wonderful occasion. And in the presence of all of you, your love, your affection, that is the Shri Kavacha against all these attacks. And once again, I wholeheartedly thank the Savarkar Pratishthan of Mysore for all the work that they're doing and for conferring this honor on me, which I very, very gratefully accept on behalf of all of you. Thank you.